Shalom Aleichem and Shavua Tov. This week, Mishnah Yomi is beginning chapter 4 of Yevamot. We're in Perek Dalet, Mishnah Aleph, a Halitza liyavimto. A man performs Halitza with the Yevama. That's so far so good. His brother passed away without children, and he's performed an act of Halitza, which we'll define in more detail later, but it is the ceremony to release this woman to marry someone else, not one of the brothers. V'nimtzet me'uberet v'yalda. But then after the Halitza, we found out she was actually pregnant, and then she gave birth. So this pregnancy is from the deceased brother. Now, ideally, whenever this situation arises where there's a possibility of Yibum or Halitza, we make the couple wait 3 months before Yibum or Halitza to make sure this woman is not pregnant from the deceased brother. In this case, they jumped the gun. They went ahead and they did the Halitza without waiting, as they should have if they had inquired with their local Orthodox rabbi. So she was already pregnant. When this child is a viable pregnancy, he's going to be a healthy child when he's born. Hu mutar bikrovoteya. The man is allowed to marry the relatives of this woman he did a Halitza to, because the Halitza was meaningless. It was unnecessary. It was nothing. V'hi mutar bikrovav, and vice versa. V'lo psola min hakahuna, and she would be allowed to marry a Kohen. So what we see from here is a Halitza that is needed is a little bit like a divorce. It severs that relationship. So after a Halitza, he can't marry her close relatives and vice versa. And since it's similar to a divorce, a halutza, that means a widow who received Halitza to marry someone else, cannot then marry a Kohen. And the Mishnah adds, Ein of Lod Shel Kayama. If Nebuch, this child is not viable, it's what's called a nafil. She gives birth and it has some sort of deformity or defect, and it's going to pass away before 30 days. It's not a viable child. So now it turns out the Halitza was actually needed. So it's a valid Halitza. Hu also bikrovateya, so he can't marry her close relatives. He asur bikrova, vice versa, sola minikahuna, and she cannot then go marry a Kohen. Now, Mishnah Aleph was all about if a Halitza took place with a pregnant widow. Now, Mishnah Bet is Hakonis et Yevimto. He marries the widow in Yibum, v'nimtzit milberetz. And then they find out she's pregnant, v'yolda, she gives birth. Now, again, they jumped the gun. They should have waited at least 3 months to make sure she's not me'uberet, that she's not pregnant before performing the marriage of Yibum. Here there are more dire consequences. Bizman shavlot shel kayama. When this child is a viable, living, healthy child, yotzi, they have to get divorced, v'chayavin bekarban, and they're chayav to bring a karban, a chatas, because they've had an illegal relationship, because, well, it's a mitzvah for the brother to marry the widow of his brother in the context of Yibum, where that deceased brother had a viable child, there's no mitzvah of Yibum. So instead, it's a sinful relationship. The Mishnah adds the corollary, if this child will not live, it's a nafil, even if he's born alive, he has some sort of deformity, and he dies within 30 days, yikayim. The marriage, the Yibum marriage, can continue. So even though there was some sort of pregnancy from the first deceased brother, it wasn't a viable child, so their Yibum can go through. They'll actually need to do Yibum again to make it official. Now, the Mishnah adds an interesting wrinkle. Suffolk ben Tisha l'rishon. What if there's a doubt whether this birth was a 9-month gestation birth from the first brother, the deceased brother, Suffolk ben Shiva la'achron? We don't know if it's a 7-month birth from the second brother. The situation here is, again, they didn't wait a full 3 months before doing Yibum to realize if this woman was pregnant. They waited about 2 months. And then 7 months later, they do give birth, mazel tov, it's a baby, but was that baby the product of her relationship from the deceased husband, the first brother, or the Yavam who married her in Yibum? So they do yotzi. They have to get divorced because we don't know. And if the child is really belonging to the first husband, there was never a mitzvah of Yibum, and instead it's an aveira, it's a sin for this relationship to continue. The vlod kosher, but in any event, the child is not a mamzer. He's certainly not the offspring of a forbidden relationship, because either he's the son of the deceased brother in which case the Yibum was meaningless, or if this child is not the son of the first brother, he's the son of the second brother, in which case the Yibum was valid because she was never pregnant from the first deceased husband. V'chayavin ba'asham tolui, and they do need to bring a carbon here, but it's a different kind of carbon. It's not a hatas that we have seen by Shabbos, we've seen by other serious transgressions. It's an asham tolui. This is a special kind of offering that's brought when there's a possibility that one should bring a carbon chatas, an actual sin offering. This is sort of like we might be guilty, so to cover it's kind of the cover our bases carbon. Yasher kochachem and Shavua Tov.